doing like government policy research using all sorts of So lately I've been more working
All
on
right.
some personal pet projects, seeing if I can
Okay, so folks, I'm going to get started with the introduction part of the meeting. Sorry to interrupt your conversation. We'll have a few minutes at the end to continue the networking part of the event. So first of all, for the folks here in the room, thank you very much for coming. When we start the next part of the presentation, the slides will be much easier to read. I'm just going to go through a couple introduction slides using this screen. So I understand that it might be a little bit difficult to see, but they're just introduction slides to the group. And so with that said, welcome. And again, thank you for being here tonight. It's actually a special night for us because this is the first night we're doing this meetup in the Cambridge office. So our group has been around now for a couple of years, the Boston Healthcare Cloud and AI community. Long story short, I spent about a dozen years helping Microsoft grow community around the world. And then when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden I found myself sitting at home and I was like, oh, the rest of you know the story. So long story short, I decided to work locally. And it was something different and it felt good. I'd spent the last 10 years going all over the world. So we started building this local community. My company invested in it. We have Microsoft has sponsored us and supported us along the way. And we keep it simple. We do monthly meetups with networking, and we like to obviously focus on the technology. So we like to try to do as many deep dives as we can, but not always deep dives. Like sometimes we'll have stuff that's a little bit interesting at the process level. Even we've had some talks about. And so that's a little bit about our group. And so tonight is the first night doing it in Cambridge. And just so you know, we also host we host other events too. So the first one I should tell everybody about is next month in March. There's actually a conference in Boston called the AI Summit, and it's the same week that we would normally have our meeting. And so what we're doing is we're actually collaborating with that conference, and we're going to have our meetup at the networking event of that conference on, I think it's Wednesday or Thursday. It's up on the website. So I do want to let you know about that because, as you know, obviously everybody, AI, right? So I'm sure there'll be a lot of AI people there. And also, you support us too. Our group will be there as part of the networking event. And we'll also have a full day event that will probably be sometime this summer, and we'll most likely do that here in the Cambridge office as well. And we're always looking for speakers, and we love to support new speakers. So I encourage people to contact us if you're interested in speaking. And also, if you have extra time and you're interested in helping organize, then that would be great as well. Boop, I covered that. I covered this. I will just touch on this. One of the things that's important to us and why we're excited about being down here in Cambridge is one of the things we like to focus on is getting more new people into the industry. And so I'm excited to come down here in Cambridge and see if we can get more students into the rooms. And so that's a quick sentence about our mission statement.
Can I ask a
Yes.
hidden question?
Yeah.
So your prior events were in Burlington?
Yes. Yeah.
So what does that audience look like? Like you mentioned coming here, you're looking for more students. What's the composition?
Candidly, we actually did get a fair amount of students that would make the trip up to Burlington. It's always tended to be a smaller group, so this is about average size, and it's grown throughout the years. When we first started, it was like half a dozen people. But I would say it's mostly folks working in health tech in some way. Being in Boston, we've seen a lot of people come through in HLS. There's some of the different HLS companies here in Cambridge would come up to Burlington, and I think some of them have offices up there as well. And but it looked honestly very much like this crowd. I would say very similar, actually. Just. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah. I will say that I've been really impressed with how this office is supporting the community events. Like I feel like they've really made it such an easy process. Like it almost feels like they're really encouraging people to do events. And so I do like that, you know, it's always nicer than having to try to track people down, etc. And also, since we're talking about them and them supporting the community, I will also just mention that we already heard some people talking about OpenClaw. So OpenClaw is sort of a new viral thing right now. A lot of people are excited about. I even got my own little bot going now. And I know at least one other person here does, maybe more. But they're actually going to have the first OpenClaw meetup here in this location as well. So if you're interested in learning more about OpenClaw and really diving into you know, the platform, etc., then I would encourage you to check that out too. It's on the Lumia event site. So if you just go up there and search for OpenClaw, I'm sure you'll find it in the Boston area. So this is the Builder Summit. So again, this is our meeting. We'll be here on March 25th. And that's it for the introduction. And so now I want to do a quick introduction, but not too long. I will let Mia introduce, give her background, but I will just tell you that I was really excited that Mia from athenahealth offered to come here and speak for the group. And the biggest reason why is because I just love the topic and it really hit home for me. And I think one of this was, it reminded me of the first mission critical clinical app I did years ago. And it was the first, we gave the patient a handheld device. And it was the very first time in the US that a patient used a handheld device. And it only had 4 buttons. Yes, no, not sure. But I remember sitting in months of meetings about usability, user design, you know, and exactly how perfect that screen had to be so that all of the patients coming into same-day surgery, right, regardless, would be able to get through it, right? And so it was such an amazing lesson to learn so early in my career. That was like 20, 25 years ago or something. And so I've always had a soft spot for user design and designing for people. And so with that said, I'm honored to have Mia here join us and talk about the topic. So let's give her a
All right. Thank you everyone for coming. I know it sounds like 30 minutes an hour, so I really appreciate your time being here. Hope this presentation will make your time worth it. And thank you, Paul, for hosting. And the pizza is actually pretty good. You know, I'm Zhang. I'm a designer working for healthcare. I spent the past 4 years working for EHR as in a house. And I have been working on an AI feature for a while, for almost a year. And it's been very interesting, rewarding, sometimes challenging journey along the way. So today I just want to spend some time, share my learnings along the way with you all. And I was hoping it could be like an engaging workshop or discussion. So feel free to raise your hand for any comments or questions. And let me give you a brief background by my role. What is UX designer? I know many of you may already work with one, but that's a very simplified product circle. And as a designer, usually I got embedded into a Scrum team with product owner, tech lead, engineer manager, and field developer. And usually got involved into the project pretty early on to find a problem, define the scope with my product owner, my stakeholder, developing design concept, testing with real user, hand off to my engineer, build it to alpha, beta, eventually GA. And also stay close to the user so we can actually hear feedback and learn along the way. I'm pretty sure you all saw this like meme on LinkedIn or social media, but that's a pretty classic one to tell the love-hate relationship I have with my stakeholder. As a designer, I'm thinking, oh, how we can improve the experience, right? What does user really want? My tech leads be like, yeah, that's like so fancy, the design concept. How are you gonna build it? I mean, without breaking other stuff, right? My product owner sometimes be like, okay, when we can actually deliver that, when we can bring it to the customer. So I think it's some tension, but a healthy tension between stakeholders, really keeping us or ensuring us delivering good product to the user to make sure we have a good balance of good user experience, good visibility, and providing real value to the user. So that's my role. That's the team I work with every day. And let's back to the project I'm working on. A disclaimer. In this presentation, I will not share any real screen to protect my company information, but I will share some low fidelity as visual reference to ground the conversation. But let's start with the problem we're solving. Why we're like this feature we call chart assistant. It's like a chat bot embedded in the provider's workflow. It really aimed to deliver the question in a concise and accurate way. But let's start with the problem we're solving. Let's say I'm a patient. I'm seeing my PCP on Wednesday, right? And ideally few days before the visit, the provider need to open my chart, going through the detail, jot down most important stuff in my chart. So when I actually see my doctor, the person already knows what's going on, why I'm here. This process is called chart prep. And that's the ideal world for chart prep. But the reality is, we all know like providers are busy, burnout is real. They don't have time for chart prep. If you're lucky, your provider may have 30 seconds to take a look at your chart before the visit. The challenge is the patient chart is massive. It's not just like one page PDF, it's not that. If I'm staying the same provider for 5 years, my chart just grows so fast and become unbearable at some moment. Second of all, some information providers are looking for chart prep. They're scattered in different corners of the chart. Problem tab, allergy, lab result, imaging result, you name it. It's really scattered around. Provider was joking like me, chart prep for me is like chart archaeology. Because I need to like really going through each corner of the chart, piece through those small information together, and then I know, okay, what's going on. That's a challenge. It's just such a time-consuming and energy-consuming process for chart prep. And that's why we're having chart assistant embedded in the workflow, really aim to solve the problem more efficiently and really giving provider the time back to do what they're supposed to do, like be faced with the patient during the visit. And here's some like very low fidelity, not real screen, to protect the company, but really low fidelity to showcase, not showcase you the whole chart, but showcase how does the chat box, the chart system looks like in the workflow. There are a few things I'm thinking about when I'm developing the feature and when I'm expanding the feature. One of the things is, how should we introduce AI to providers? Because keep in mind, those are the same group of people who are using paper and pen not long time ago. Then we're saying, actually, you should move to a digital system. That's more efficient. And now we're saying, actually, forget about that. You should use AI. That's actually faster. Those are big steps. We're really forcing big steps on the provider. So first learning I have along the way is really guide users through those AI onboarding. Do not just drop them in an empty chatbot. On the left, you can see that's actually, the first iteration we have for the chat box, what we call it a question first experience. What do I mean by that is when provider open the chatbot in their EHR, in the workflow, they can ask any question they want. There's like free text box, they can like ask any questions. When I first designing this experience, I was thinking, oh my God, we're giving them freedom. They can do whatever, ask whatever they want. But in reality, when we have user interviews, it's not a freedom, it's like very terrifying experience. Provider was asking, oh my God, Mia, what should I ask? What can I ask? Or how should I frame my question to get the answer I want? They don't know where to start, which makes sense. So after realizing the problem, what does user really want? We quickly pivot to the right. That's what we call a summary first experience. What do I mean by that is when user first open the chatbot, we will pre-populate the summary, what has changed since last visit to the provider. And what they actually do for the provider is we're saving them time typing the question. And most importantly, we're giving them a starting point of what they can do with this AI tool. For example, you can see, there's a mammogram. Then as a provider, of course, you have a follow-up question like, tell me more about this mammogram, or tell me the last abnormal mammogram. So they really help provider get into the AI, like, oh, maybe I can do this, maybe I can do that, instead of like looking at an empty chatbot that have no idea where to start. So that's the first learning. Guide the user, do not let them drown in the AI. Second learning is we all know like AI for some providers is relatively new and sometimes like pretty not really intuitive. So how can we ground AI feature in an existing mental model? What do I mean by that is, so for example, one of the most commonly asked questions in chat assistant is about lab result. For example, show me the most recent A1C or summarize the past 6 months abnormal lab result. And initially when I first designed experience, of course, I was thinking, let's just like, display in the most plain text format. I thought, that's what they get used to read. But actually, they really want what they were told in the medical school is they still get used to read data in either fishbone or table or bullet point. That's their like comfort zone, right? When they saw like fishbone or table format, they connect those pattern with what they learned in medical school. So after we deliver like pivot from this to that, we got like very great user feedback. Some provider call it like a little gorgeous chart. That's how they love it. How easy you can read, how easy you can scan through. So that's another thing. We are delivering AI with like new technology. Does not mean we cannot connect AI with the existing pattern. It's much easier for user to get on board once they recognize something they're familiar with. That's another learning we have. After we introduce this AI feature, after we pass through the first phases, another thing I was thinking about is how do we expand? There's a very interesting quote I heard from a colleague. Usually when we're developing the product, we get ready, then we aim, then we fire. But for AI, it's so tricky because sometimes we get ready, then fire, then aim, then fire again. Because sometimes you just have to put the AI, the content it generates in front of the user to get real feedback. But the learning I have is when you first release AI feature, really take it slow in the beginning. Because you do need to evaluate the risk for early adoption. And for our feature, some of the risk we're evaluating is performance, the accuracy, the trust. I'm not saying like you need to wait until the accuracy is perfect. I'm not saying this. What I'm saying is there's a trustworthy of your system or your product, and there's a trust in the user. And as a designer, we need to make sure those two things are equal. We need to eliminate the gap between the system trustworthy and users' trust. That's what we're aiming for. And also another thing is, when you decide to roll out a feature, when you evaluate the risk, there's one thing you can think about. Is your feature like replacing an existing workflow? Or is your feature mainly like a nice to have for provider? And for our case, it's like we're not replacing any existing chart prep workflow. We're mainly saying, actually, we were freezing in the early stage. We're freezing as an experiment. It's right here. It's a reference. You can use it if you want. Second thing, while we're expanding is make sure be honest with your user. Make sure you tell your early adopter what to expect. And I can share some real examples we have. I remember when we first rolled out Chat Assistant, we have like a very, very small alpha pool, like 3 alpha users, the most tiny alpha pool you may have ever heard. And also, before we enable this feature, we schedule one-on-one with user to tell them, what this product is doing well right now and what is not doing well. And sometimes to tell them the expectation, for example, it may take relatively long time to get to you the answer you want. So, this transparency is so important, and managing their expectation is so important. And the other thing is, pick your early adopter wisely. There's some provider, they just won't be able to use it until you're fully ready. They're not your early adopter. They're not your perfect early adopter user, right? Pick someone who are willing to test new things, who's open-minded, who's willing to explore, and most importantly, who's vocal about their experience. What is doing well, what is not. They're willing to share with you in the early process. That's one of the most important things. And the last thing I want to say is, I highly recommend, if you have the resource, to do a site visit or at least a remote shadowing to see how users actually interact with your product in real life. And honestly, the site visit is the most eyes-opening experience I have. And it's also tied with the previous one, that choose your early adopter wisely, because you're gonna keep a close close relationship with those users. They should be able to allow you to do interviews or the research you want. That's super important in early phases. Another thing I want to share is, after the early alpha phases, or in any phases of the product, always keep close to your user so you can actually learn and iterate. That's your job, right, as a designer or anyone in your team. And through all the research idea, site visit, remote shadowing, interview, concept testing, usability testing, it actually helped us find the right use case and improve on it. If you remember the first slides, the problem we're talking about, initially why we had this feature is because we want to help provider improving or doing the chart prep more efficiently. That's prior to the visit, right? But actually during the site visit, we found there's much more use case our product can be helpful for. For example, during the visit, I remember during one of the site visit, I followed the provider into the room with the patient. The patient was complaining, I have a headache, pretty bad for a long time. And I saw immediately the provider opened our feature Chat Assistant and asked the Chat Assistant, when's the last time patient asked for a headache? Or when's the last time, patient take medication for headache? That's actually one of the interesting use cases I haven't thought about when I first designed this feature. Same as well for the use case for after the visit. When I was on site with the doctor, I saw their assistant was constantly requesting whether the care team can also use Chat Assistant, because sometime after the visit, the patient or the patient family may call the office, to follow up on some task. And as you can imagine, for a practice who's seeing patient 40, 50 patient, it's impossible for the care team member to remember every detail of the patient the doctor is saying today. So that would be great. The nurse told me it would be great if they can just use chatbot, the Chat Assistant, to quickly help them catch up on specific patient. The phone call is of that. That will really save their day and help them a lot. So that's the first thing, find the right use case and improve it. Second of all is performance is really the key. That's also something we learned from the remote shadowing, because I remember in very early stage, we asked to remote shadowing a provider. The provider just shared the screen and we are just quietly sitting on the back, looking how the provider using Chat Assistant with the patient. It's very informative and almost embarrassing experience, because when provider asked a question, I remember it just took so long for our Chat Assistant to get back to the provider. In a way, the provider already found the answer manually in the chart by themselves, which is embarrassing, right? But that's also a learning for us because we know if our bot cannot hit the performance metric, no one gonna use it. Because like we said before, the provider is already busy. They have like a 30-second top or 2 minutes top to do the chart prep. If our bot took like 1 or 2 minutes, they might just do it the old school way, manually find the answer by themselves. So performance is really the key. And of course, accuracy, as you can all imagine, like healthcare is such a, delicate area. What you provide can actually impact the patient's life. So accuracy and speed, most important things we're improving on right now. The last thing, find a game changer. Initially, like I think I mentioned that before, our bot's really good at finding the lab result, medications, blah, blah, blah. But those tasks is helpful. They may say provider like 30 seconds or 2 minutes in their chart prep, right? But the real game changer are those most time consuming tasks. For example, those 40 pages PDF. If you saw like a specialist, like if I saw ortho, they may send my PCP a 40 pages long consult note. And my PCP, unfortunately need to read them through. So my PCP know like what's going on with my ortho visit. That's the most sufferable, most time consuming task. So if our bot can help provider fix that, or doing that, that could really help with our expansion, our adoption. So that's one of the learning, find the game changer and you really, put effort into that. That will help you product grow in long term. I will take a pause here. Any question or comment? Cool. You're all enjoying the pizza? Now really pay attention. Cool. There's a kind of like a side note I want to share, which is a very interesting exercise I run internally and externally during the project. It's called 11-star experience or 11-star workshop. What do I mean is, imagine when you download an app from App Store and you have to rate it. You may rate it like 5-star if it matches your expectation, if that's like, good app overall, right? But imagine what kind of experience. You may give it like 11-star. It must be a somehow like mind-blowing experience, right? And that's a goal. That's why I run it on the provider. Because sometimes I realize provider, and of course they tend to be more conservative or more cautious on what AI can do for them, given it's in healthcare. But sometimes as a UXer, you do need to think ahead and sometimes think wild what they can do for the user, what user really, really want. That's why I ran the workshop on them to let them imagine long-term and let them imagination go wild and tell me what do they really want in 10 years, not even 10 years, 10 months probably in the speed right now. So a summary from the workshop, a 5-star experience, aka the expected experience, is provider mentioned, I just want an accurate and concise response to answer my question, help with my question with my patient, which makes sense. 5-star. When we're talking about the 6 and 7-star, aka exceeding the expectation, providers start to talk about personalized experience. What if chart system can remember my question every time for each patient or for each provider? They also mentioned what about instead of answer my question, the chat assistant can proactively highlight items require my attention in the chart. It's interesting because it almost sounds like it's talking about like chart assistants equal to a real assistant in their care team, which I found very interesting. And the 11-star, the ultimate dream, the experience, it's almost like, to summarize what I heard, is almost like provider want a digital assistant be with them before, during, and after the visit. And I have a quote here I really love from provider is, eventually never have to physically chart again. It's really a great dream to pursue and believe it is something happening in the world somewhere already. So that's actually my presentation. Any questions or comments? Yeah, thank you.
So in the building the trust with for the physician, was there at any point, instead of just showing them the summarized chart, that they wanted to actually go and verify if this information is up to date and accurate? Did they say, oh, it would be great if we had a link that would take us to where this data has been allocated from?
Love this question, really great question. Actually, that's something we just implemented last release. So you're somehow reading our mind. But I think taking a step back about trust, those are two layers, right? The trust, you need to first understand you're trustworthy, your system trustworthy. And to understand that, we did a lot of internal testing. We have our golden patient, we have like our internal physician helping us doing those tests. So we know which data source our bot is good at versus what is not. That's something we need to like understand first ourselves. The second is the information we pass to the provider, the user, right? If you just say, oh, we're not doing well on medications, it's less useful for provider. But if you just like tweak the things into actually for this medication inquiry, like, or the use case, this use case specifically, you can phrase this way instead of that. For example, I'll give you an example, like one thing interesting enough is for some reason in our bot, if you just ask, give me the result, our bot can go to the imagery result. But if you ask, give me the lab result, our bot then go to lab result. So sometimes it's also like tell user how to use it more wisely. So I think there are two layers. One is understand trustworthy yourself. Second is be transparent with the trust and also kind of guide user how to use it like in a way it work more efficiently. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, please go ahead.
So I have a follow-up question on what you just said of like, the chatbot giving two separate results if they're not using the vocabulary like or the framing the sentence correctly. So how do you, in a way, train the providers or at least like guide them in any way of like, this is a certain like, this is how you should be using our chatbot or yeah, so like so that you get the desired results because when we use generative AI in like non-productive tasks, it's okay if like we can do multiple iterations of like to understand like what to get the result that we want, but specifically time sensitive and important situations, how do you do that?
I think that's a great question as well. Few things. Initially, when we first release a feature, as you mentioned, that's like a balance between we do our due diligence, make sure it's good enough. Second is there's some pressure. Imagine, probably true for every AI feature is our company try to get ahead of everyone. So there's a balance. One is good enough. I think another thing is, I think sometimes when we try to build a feature in long term, we got to be intuitive enough instead of like training the user to do that, right? So I think how we do that is, first of all, we collect lots of questions in the back end to learn how user ask question and what's the most commonly asked question. So we can first of all prioritize which data source we need to fix. Second of all is, okay, if we do know like sometimes, provider just ask short question like instead of mammogram, they ask mammal. We can give instructions to the bot. So the bot got trained for provider, not the other way around. And I think the third things is not about the vocabulary, but more like a workflow. How we can make this AI, or in general, like all the AI product, more seamlessly embedded in the EHR that we're using or their daily work. Right now, it's just a window, a floating button they can open every time during the chart. But still, there's like an extra click. So another thing we're trying to work on is how we can just embed the AI in their daily workflow in where they actually need help. For example, in the problem tab, in the lab tab, instead of let provider go to a certain area, ask a question. So To answer the question in short, is we want to train the bot, not the provider. Second of all, I think an ideal product, at least my understanding, an ideal product is like using a very intuitive experience that potentially or indirectly influence user behavior, but not make them feel they're trained for that. Is that what you're asking? Okay. Yes.
So I have a question about how you evaluate the performance of a product like this. As like, for example, one thing you mentioned, you let the bot think about a problem or retrieve information and see if it's faster or slower than an actual physician does. So I'm just wondering, what are other like metrics or tests that you use to test like the performance of the chatbot?
Yeah, I think there are lots of like metric, like you said, the speed, the accuracy. I'm pretty sure a lot of people works in AI, you may heard some benchmark you can compare to. I think for UI or product side, one of the metric, another metric we're tracking is active user. Yeah, I think active user is an end result, but there's so many factors can contribute to that. Like we said, the performance is one thing. Whether we're solving for the right use case is one thing. Whether we really, make sure people are aware of the feature is another thing. So our engineers working on the performance, but there are just so many factors could contribute to the, like, eventually the ultimate metric we're tracking for. Yeah, for example, interesting enough is sometimes you saw our bot twice, but of course, as you can understand, in early phases, it's not ideal. So they may try once or twice, then never open again. But over months, we're making lots of progress. Sometimes we're making the enhancement they actually want, but they won't know it. That's also another enhancement we're making. Like we're making those like tooltips, release note, user group to really bring awareness to the user. We heard you, like we're making this, you should try again. So that's also another thing we're doing to contribute to active user.
Do you like collect feedback from the users, like let them rate their experience and like maybe provide feedback on the features so that you can incorporate them into the future updates?
That's a good question. I think we're working closely with user all the time. Different phases, there are different ways how we work with them. As you can imagine, like when we have 3 alpha users, we have a very small user pool. We're talking to them whenever they want. They message us whenever they can. But as we're scaling up to 100 users, it's no longer manageable. We can no longer talk to people every day, to each individual of them. We're hosting user group where we cannot talk to user, like collect the major thing and also tell them what's going on in our future, what is coming next. And there's, we're lucky enough, we have lots of support in our company to help us monitor feedback as well, especially for those larger customers, we have people dedicated to, handling those situations. That's one thing, outside of the product. Inside the product, we do have like a feedback. You provider, when you're using it, they can give a thumb up, thumb down. Pretty standard pattern, like ChatGPT. Like, if you give a thumb down, we'll ask you, why you don't like us? And we're collecting all this feedback in the backend.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Go first.
So how do you handle personalization for each provider?
Short answer, we're not there yet.
Okay.
But here's my designer dream. One of the reasons why we do not have the active user, we do not hit the number we want for active users because we're not customized enough. As you can imagine, my PCP, the question my PCP asks, my ortho asks, cardiology asks, OB/GYN asks are so different. Right now, we're collecting all the questions asked, and we're able to provide some, not customization, but some shortcut. For example, like pre-qualified some questions got asked all the time. That's not enough. Ideally, we can customize this question and allow user to add a question they really want to ask by specialty, by appointment type, or even by provider. That's the ultimate dream. Our team is like, so many things we want to do, bit by bit.
I'm just if this is already in the market, like have you gotten any post-surveillance insights into, I guess, like features or any feedback on areas that the customer wants you to improve, or maybe even challenges that they are encountering?
Yeah, I think, like we mentioned before, in different phases, we have different way how we connect with users through interviews, set visit, user group, their success manager. We're collecting feedback all the time, and right now the problem is we have such a long wish list. Our frequent you should see like hundreds of features we want to work on, but we have limited stores because just so many things we can do. But yes, we're collecting feedback. We really value like user feedback, and sometimes there's a nuance like. I remember there's one time the user group, in one of the user group people mentioned, oh, I want patient cases as one data source. The next time, 1 month later, we're delivered that already. You can see the excitement on the user. And that's one of the things, you keep relationship with your user. Make sure you heard them, make sure you deliver things you want. Bit by bit. Cool. Hi. Yeah.
Did you, what was your early adopter persona? Like, did you see any specific persona stand out as being an early adopter, whether it's like by specialty or demographic information?
So initially our criteria is not really on the specialty, it's more like I've been working on the same company for 4 years. I know someone, I know some provider are really vocal, really willing to try new things. And of course, like their other connection kind of send us recommendation. And honestly, we were not really prioritize specialty, but more prioritize the style of the provider. Are they willing to cooperate with us, even if our product's not perfect? Yeah. But later on, as we expand, we intentionally include more specialties to make sure we're covering every use case. Cool. Sorry, I think there's someone in the back end, right? You raise your hand first.
So my question is, during this development stage, right? Since it involves a lot of healthcare data, right? So where do you think the HIPAA compliance comes into play, which is like absolute necessary when you deal with the patient's real world data? Do you think that is too early in the development, or something when the model goes live, or that's when you are interacting with people?
I catch part of the question, maybe because I eat too much pizza. I heard when it's too early to use real patient data. Is that what you're asking?
No. So I have a healthcare background, and when I'm dealing with the healthcare data, there is HIPAA compliance, which means you cannot reveal patient's name or some more details relating to disease and whatnot, right? Now you're collecting so much data, right? And at some point in the development, you have real world data coming to you, right? So where do you think that HIPAA compliance comes into play, where you cannot give out that information which is coming from the information?
Can I ask this quick question? Are you building on the healthcare?
Yeah.
I'm so glad we're clarifying this question. We're HIPAA compliant, 100%. We're also one thing I want to call, in case my colleague is on the video, we're not collecting patient data. We're not. We're collecting providers' question. We're collecting, for example, providers asking, give me the most recent A1C result, but we're not collecting the result. I'm so glad we clarified that. But yeah, I think the reason why we're collecting those questions from provider is because we want to understand the use case, what to prioritize. But even as a designer, I'm not touching patient data. We, HIPAA compliant. Yes.
But you could if you wanted to, because it's an electronic health record.
Oh my God, that's dangerous area.
No, you're building within an existing PSR, which is already.
In case my manager's online, I'm not touching any patient data.
I know, you're not in for your job, but.
Yeah. Even I think we have a very minimal exposed rules at all. Even for research, we're using fake patients, avoiding any PHI. That's such a dedicated area. Cool. So you go first.
So we all know that AI is possible to give out wrong responses even if you're asking something. So in case of healthcare, especially when it is time sensitive and also when the information is also sensitive. So how do you as designer build around AI failures? So how do you in terms of chatbot if the AI is providing you wrong information? So and like how do you make the provider aware or like at least give a disclaimer of like, you know, this may or may not be correct? Because-
Like, I can help answer that, actually, if you want. I just volunteer because I do think it's a little bit more of a back-end question than a user experience question. Meaning that most often what you see is guardrails are put in place at the LLM level down. So for example, we build on Azure. And so typically what we would do is pick what models we're going to use in Boundary and then choose how we'll deploy them. And then the very next step is to choose which guardrails to apply. And there are even healthcare specific guardrails that you can download that are available from Microsoft that you can use as templates to get you started. And then, because obviously you want to catch as much of this up front before you pass it off to the user design, right, to the user experience. And so I just wanted to add that Mia may have some tips to add as the designer as well, but typically that, like, is the LLM right or wrong? You know, you're going to try to do that up front with evaluations at the LLM level, the background.
Yes, so given that the LLM, so like you can control that up to an extent, that's fine, but like, you know how in ChatGPT also they give you a disclaimer of like, you know, this information may or may not be correct. So that way I'm asking more in terms of the user interface. So like, are there any provisions for some sort of sensitive questions where you provide like some sort of disclaimer of like, you know, verify like what the chatbot is saying, or like, you know, verify this thing or this may or may not be correct. Some sort of like just to, yes.
Just to piggyback on that, I think the question would be, is it an agentic chatbot where it's going to synthesize and come up with that, or is it something that's just aggregating the information from the chart?
Mm-hmm.
So that way the margins of error are less. Yeah, because it's not replicating the doctor's synthesis of, okay, this case is X, Y, and Z. It's just bringing it up front, all the information. Is that correct?
I think there's like there's a nuance there. The model is choosing which data sort to prioritize. We're not feeding the whole chart to the model. We're like, you let them choose. And but yes, everything is like based on the chart data. But sometimes I do feel like the inaccuracy or dilution, at least right now, is inevitable in anything you use. Do you trust your like ChatGPT fully? I don't. I trust you. My ChatGPT to fix my dryer, but not trusting enough to do my task, right? So right now, inevitable. In the future, I don't know. I do have one like question I want to share, but I will take one more question. I think you raised your hands, right?
Yeah, I'm curious how you figure out what you can build and how you can build it, because I think in traditional UI you kind of have a lot of patterns and triggers that you can expect versus in AI when it's more when it doesn't have so much of a shape. How do you kind of design that experience and design what the input versus the output would be?
Yeah, I hear you. I think interesting enough, like sometimes working on AI feature is more like working on startup. Sometimes you're not fully sure, right? I think there are two layers. First of all is the confidence or the balance. When do you feel comfortable deliver it? Second is you cannot control the AI output directly, but what you can do. First of all, like I mentioned that before, there's a balance. I mean, every company try to get ahead of game, and sometimes as a designer, sometimes out of your control when you can deliver it. But as your designer, you do due diligence, you do your testing, you communicate the pros and cons of risk. You know, if ultimately as a team you do deliver this, at least you're transparent, like externally, internally, what you can get. Second of all, is you cannot control the outcome directly. However, you can indirectly control. For example, the table format I shared earlier, you can still control, okay, what kind of, you can give some structure, right? I want to show the like order type, the when collected, the whether it's normal, abnormal. And then, you know, you can build in a prompt model instruction to tell your model, like, ideally, I want this, but details you can decide. Cool. There's one more thing I want to share is how does AI influence the designer's world? Initially, I was hoping it's an open floor, but thank you for all the amazing questions. I will just quickly share my takeaway, and maybe after presentation, if you are interested, we can definitely connect, stay here, talk things if you want to share.
But just real quick, we do have just those people that we have like 10 minutes, and they asked us that we do have to leave at 6:30. So I would encourage you to, while we're wrapping up, to please scrap any last piece that you like. And then as you're wrapping up, Mia, we'll probably have like 5 minutes to talk. Okay, sorry, go.
Yeah, sorry, take my step back. Basically, get out and grab your pizza. But that's another classic meme I borrow from my designer colleague, but which I represent some reflection I made recently about how AI influenced my designer, both positive and sometimes in an interesting way. That's just one of the perspectives. In traditional way, how we build products, agile waterfall, agile. In waterfall, let's say you want to build a car. You build it well, you build a body, you build a door, and eventually you get a car. If you're lucky, ideally you build a car. For agile, you just build something, you're on the right track to build a car, right? But you may turn into like bicycle, motorcycle, then become a car. But for AI prototyping, you ask for a car. The AI prototyping, I'm using like a Figma Make, VO, Loveful. They may give me like those luxury RV with like 10 people seat, which I don't really need, which is okay. But sometimes, when my peers or when some internal stakeholders have those AI prototyping tool, sometimes they just give it to me like, oh, Mia, how about let's do this? Let's do those fancy cars. I totally get it. It does look nice. Maybe sometimes it does have some overlaps with what user really want. It was so fun until you pass the engineer talking about feasibility, talking about scope, talking about we can deliver that. Then this AI prototype kind of like, fell apart. Because you're not starting with a problem, you're starting with a solution, right? And that's what reflection I'm learning right now. With all those AI tools as an accelerator, but there's still some craftsmanship should be reserved. The value of design process, the value of you actually talking to user, the value of like problem statement, that's the core of like UXer, right? We're not like, the value is not really making box in Figma, that's the easy part. The the hard part is why you build design like this. That's just one reflection I have. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for all. Yeah, kudos to my colleague if they're on the call. Like, I borrowed that from one of the readouts, but I love it. I love AI it does help me in many perspectives. Where I can build interactive prototype without wasting like that development time. But sometimes there's just something we should also remind ourselves, what is UX? Cool.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
So let's feel free, like I said, we have about 10 minutes to socialize and wrap up the meeting if there's any more questions. I guess I'll just remind everybody that next month our meetup is on the 25th, and then we'll be at the AI Summit Conference for the folks that came in later. So it'll be up on the website, but there's an AI Summit here in Boston, March 23rd, 4th, 5th, something like that. And on the 25th, we'll share the networking event. So it'll be more like a social event at this AI Summit. And that'll be on March 25th. And again, just thank you so much for coming out. It's really an honor to see everybody here. On our first time in Cambridge, like I said, typically we do this in Rome. And I guess just one more time for Mia.
Of course. Thank you.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Even though my, of course, it's my job.
Our office is in Rockford.
Any question about meeting?
Zhang, Zhang. Sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, you did?
Just to get it out.
Worked in Athena for a while, actually. Now it's doing some data science. Most recently,
It's nice meeting you.
No, I am, but I'm so, yeah. I can see
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Ready? Okay, so I'll give you contact that.
You know Sarah Bell?
No.
Maybe she was in Athena for a while.
Yeah, I know. Then we can meet.
I mean, I was
frustrated. I was trying to Really? I spent like years trying to do that. I couldn't get them. I couldn't get any traction. I spent years trying to figure out what I was doing. And that wasn't a lot of inspiration. Yeah. Yeah. I was there at 17, so.
Yeah, that was really.
I was actually.
No, but I really love it.
She was pretty good.
Oh my God.
We were in the midst of like this gateway. And I actually, at one point, we had access to like many different systems. I think we had like 100 million.
No, I just graduated. Oh, thank you.
I put together a hierarchy that gathered a lot of a bunch of different Microsoft systems. Which I thought was really neat. Are you also like across a year?
No, we just.
I'm sorry about it.
I'm ready.
Goes through a perfect science cycle.
Are you students now?
Yeah.
Are you like students?
Yeah, but no pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw that. I was like, There's so much we can do with this.
Oh, I'm working on.
I have a friend who's still over in the pop health world.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. They've been trying to submerge it for years and years. It was a separate company for a while. Yeah, he does a lot with AI out there, like, for doing development, like, searching for bugs.
Oh, I used to. The most feedback.
Yeah, it's cool to see where it's going. I'm happy
They're hosting all the sessions, like they're
Really?
yeah, they have like a network session.
Really?
And a lot of these were like, empty. So I was still like, they sort of actually because it's technically hosting the audience.
Yeah.
But they don't have an audience, or they don't have a ended up not doing. Yeah, but they're because like, it's very big for like tech companies. Like that,
It was interesting. I don't know. You're probably doing.
that was like fine. It is still popular. I think it's more popular for the leadership of the world in New York, San Francisco. Yeah, I think like today, right now, like, actually it's happening at, if you're free sometime, today, yeah. Yeah, it got very spike. I was just no, I mean, I'm telling you should watch them on. They're like three companies who basically are people from the audience. It's like basically roasting their roasting their resumes or like roasting their it's really fun. And it's especially like
Thank you so much. That was great talking.
I'm a student, but I go to London.
I actually applied for a role there again. I applied for a role there again. I didn't end up my loss on
I just graduated from
anyways. Yeah, and I hope to see you next time.
Oh, no, I wasn't asking you. What
Are you able to do that before you're?
So,
Because that's what I want to do. I want to like gather up all my data across
yeah.
all the different health.
So
centers
we're
I've gone
what
to.
we've done so far is we've done the research of all of